Hello, my name is Josefa Flores, and I am going to share my journey on my critter inquiry project. The purpose was to conduct two experiments using mealworms. I was to observe, record, and analyze the data in my science journal throughout this 8-week experience. Before I purchased my critters, I did some research on the type of living environment and the food that they need to eat. I purchased them on January 25th from Petco. When I first got them, they were in a container. And when they were in the store, they were actually refrigerated. And that's when I learned that if you keep them in colder temperatures, it will preserve their life. I transferred them to a container. I also poked holes. That way they're able to breathe. The foods that I introduced to them were shredded pieces of carrot, apple slices, and some oats. Experiment number 1, light versus dark. My inquiry is, how does lightning conditions affect the movement of mealworms? I basically wanted to know, do mealworms prefer light or dark? My plan and procedure is I shined a flashlight every 20 minutes for a total of 80 minutes on a paper plate. My hypothesis is that the brightness of the light, which is the manipulated variable, will attract the responding variable, being the mealworms, and that the mealworms will move towards the light. And these were the results. So on trial 1, 4 prefer the light and 6 the dark. Trial 2 and 3 both had the same results, 5 and 5. Trial 4 is the same as trial 1. 4 prefer the light and 6 in the dark. And my last trial, 3 prefer the light and 7 in the dark. So in the end, the darkness wins. In this experiment, I concluded that my hypothesis was incorrect and that more mealworms moved towards the darkness versus the light. Experiment number 2, wet versus dry. My inquiry: do mealworms prefer a wet paper towel over a dry paper towel in the environment? Basically, do they prefer wet over dry? In my plan and procedure, I placed the responding variables, being the 6 mealworms in the center of the plate, which is the control variable. I had 2 small pieces of paper towels, one wet and one dry. Those are the manipulated variables. I then observed the behavior of the worms, and I completed 3 trials of this experiment. My hypothesis is that the mealworms will prefer wet versus dry because mealworms do like moisture. And these were the results for experiment 2. On trial 1, 2 preferred wet, 4 dry. Trial 2, 1 preferred wet, 5 dry. And trial 3, 4 preferred wet and 2 dry. My conclusion is there were no obvious preferences to wet or dry, although I predicted they would prefer the wet paper towel. If you look at the data chart, there is no pattern that you can see, so therefore the results are just kind of up and down. A few interesting things that I would like to share of my critters throughout this experience is I learned a few things about them that I never knew. For one, their life cycle. I never knew that my mealworm was going to be a beetle eventually. On February 5th, that was the first time I noticed any type of shedding. I had some dark brown mealworms and some black mealworms. Some of the black ones were actually dried up and dead, so I had to clean it out and remove everything. On February 10th, that's the first time I saw a white albino-like mealworm. I then became really curious. I thought that my mealworms were about to die because of the color. I came across some interesting information, which is their life cycle. So basically, they begin as an egg, and from there, they emerge into the larva. The larvae are the mealworms that we actually purchase from the store. They're brown. Then they move into the pupa stage, and that's when they start to look albino. And then after that, they become a beetle. And once they become a beetle, they could be black or they can be brown. It actually took 6 weeks and 2 days of having my mealworms before I experienced my first beetles. Thank you for listening. The end.